The galaxy is a crucible of endless war. But for the soldiers of Cadia, war is not just a state of being. It's the very blood in their veins. For 10,000 years, their world stood as the bulwark against the greatest threat humanity has ever known. The Eye of Terror. Cadians were born into the long shadow of chaos. Their first lullabies, the thrum of Lasgon valleys. Their first prayers, a litany of hate against the archenemy. They were the shield of the Imperium, a bastion of unwavering faith and unbreakable will. But now, Cadia has fallen. The planet shattered, its people scattered across the uncaring stars. Yet, the spirit of Cadia endures. For a Cadian, to draw breath is to fight. To hold a weapon is to defy the darkness. They are the last wall, a fortress not of stone and steel, but of sheer, indomitable human spirit. Today, we journey to a forgotten corner of the galaxy, to a desolate moon where one such fragment of Cadia's might holds the line. This is the story of the 144th Cadian platoon, stationed at the remote outpost designated Last Hope's Den. A name that, in the grim darkness of the 41st millennium, feels more like a cruel joke than a declaration of faith. Their watch had been uneventful, a monotony of patrol routes and maintenance checks that bred a dangerous sense of complacency. But then, the sky tore open. Reality bled. Warp space vomited forth its nightmares, and the chaos incursion began. Communication with command was severed in an instant. The stars themselves seemed to writhe in agony. The 144th was alone, an island of Imperial order in an ocean of raw, screaming madness. Sergeant Kellen, a veteran whose face was a roadmap of a dozen campaigns, took command. His voice, gravelly and calm, cut through the rising panic. "Hold the line! For the Emperor!" And for Cadia, his words were a familiar comfort, the creed that had sustained them through hells unimaginable. The platoon, a mix of grizzled survivors of the fall and fresh-faced white shields who had never even seen their homeworld, snapped to their posts. Las guns crackled, heavy bolters roared their defiance, and the first wave of demonic horrors crashed against their defenses. They fought with the cold, calculated fury that defined the Cadian way of war. Every shot was precise, every movement disciplined. They repelled the first assault, and the second, and the third. The bodies of cultists and gibbering monstrosities piled high against the outpost's perimeter walls. But with each passing cycle, their victory felt more hollow. The enemy was endless, a tide of insanity that eroded not just their fortifications, but their very minds. The true siege was not against their walls, but against their souls. The whispers started subtly, a fleeting doubt during a reload, a shadow in the corner of an eye that seemed to mock them. The air grew thick with unspoken heresies, suggestions of futility, of surrender. "Why do you fight?" A voice like dry leaves would rustle in a guardsman's ear. "The Imperium has forgotten you. Cadia is gone. You are nothing." Corporal Anya was the first to show the strain. Her aim, once legendary within the platoon, became erratic. She'd stare into the swirling madness of the sky, muttering about patterns in the chaos, about a great eye that saw them not as enemies, but as lost children. Kalen tried to reach her, his words of duty and honor falling on deaf ears. "It's beautiful, Sergeant," she whispered one night, her own eyes reflecting the unnatural starlight. "It offers pass." The next morning, her post was empty. Her lasgun lay on the ground, cold and unused. They never found her body. The whispers grew bolder, tailoring their temptations to each soldier's deepest fears and desires. For Trooper Vox, a young man who missed the taste of real food, the recycled nutrient paste began to smell and taste of grand feasts. He was found trying to crawl over the barricades, babbling about a banquet held in his honor just beyond the kill zone. For others, the whispers preyed on grief. Guardsman Torben, who had lost his family during the fall of Cadia, began seeing them in the swirling energies of the warp storm. They beckoned to him, promising a reunion, a world without war, a paradise just beyond the veil. His faith, once a fortress, crumbled into dust. He walked out into the storm, calling their names, and was torn apart by the very apparitions he sought to embrace. Kalen watched his platoon disintegrate, not from bolter shells or chainswords, but from the inside out. He felt the insidious tendrils of chaos probing his own mind, reminding him of his failures, of every soldier he couldn't save. The mantra, to hold the line is to die slowly, but to retreat is heresy, echoed in his skull. But the whispers offered a third option. To embrace is to live forever. He doubled down on prayer and catechisms of hate. He led his remaining soldiers and shouted litanies, their voices a fragile shield against the encroaching madness. He realized with chilling clarity that their faith was not just a source of morale. It was a physical force. It was the only thing anchoring this small patch of reality. The only thing keeping the outpost's walls from melting into screaming faces and the ground from turning to seas of blood. Their collective belief was a dam holding back an ocean of impossibility. But the dam was cracking. One by one, his soldiers fell, not to wounds, but to despair. They turned on each other over imagined slights whispered in their ears, or simply lay down their weapons and allowed the horrors to claim them. The line between reality and nightmare blurred until it ceased to exist. Kalan saw the faces of his fallen comrades and the demons that clawed at the gates. He heard the voice of his old drill abbot chanting blasphemous praise to the ruinous powers. Finally, only Kalan remained. He stood alone in the command center, the last bastion of sanity. The Voxcaster, long silent, crackled to life. It was Anya's voice, but changed, melodic and serene. "It's not too late, Kalang," she sang. "Join us. There is no duty, no emperor, only the beautiful, glorious truth of chaos. We are free." He looked at the tactical map, at the single blinking rune that represented his position, Last Hope's Stand. He looked at the Cadian gate, Aquila tattooed on his fist. He was the last wall. His faith was the final stone holding the arch of reality together. If he fell, this place, this memory of Imperial rule, would be utterly consumed. With a final, guttural roar, he grabbed his lasgun. The planet broke before the guard did. He screamed into the cacophony, his voice raw with defiance. He knew he was going to die. He knew he was already dead. But retreat was heresy. And surrender was unthinkable. As the walls of the outpost finally buckled and the tide of madness poured in, Sergeant Kalen met it head-on. His faith was the last shot fired. His defiance was the final act of a war that could never truly be won, only fought. In the end, he discovered the ultimate truth of the Cadian soldier. That faith is the only thing holding reality together, even as it shatters you, one piece at a time. To be Cadian is to stand, even when all else falls. This story captures the essence of the Astra Militarum S struggle and the terrible price of faith in the 41st millennium. They told me this was an honor. They lied. This cold, iron shell. It feels like a punishment. A tomb that walks. My name, it was Ulrich. Ulrich Weiner. Ulrich Weiner, I think. The name feels like a ghost on a tongue I no longer possess. I was a hero, they said, a champion of the 6th Legion. The VO cave. I walked in the light of the Allfather, with the wind of Fenris at my back and my brothers at my side. We fought for unity, for the Great Crusade. We brought worlds into compliance, and our sagas were sung across the stars. I remember the warmth of the hearth and the tea, the taste of me, the sting of a brother's jest, the weight of a trusted axe in my hand. I remember the roar of the pack as we charged into battle, a storm of ceramite and fury. I remember the pride, the camaraderie, the unshakable belief that we were forging a better future for all mankind. I remember Lemon Russ, our Primarch, a figure of impossible might and savage wisdom. His presence was a fire that warmed us all. Those memories, they are all I have left, fading embers in the cold dark of this sarcophagus. The battle that broke me is a blur of fire and pain. A mecha warlord, a monstrous green tide, a last stand on a forgotten world. I remember the impact, the world turning to white-hot agony, and then nothing. I awoke to this, a cacophony of worry servos, the stench of sacred oils, and the suffocating embrace of adamantium. My limbs were gone. My face, my body, all sacrificed on the altar of victory. They saved what was left, the pulped ruin of a man, and gave me this new form. A dreadnought. T. Iron Wolf, you will serve the Legion forever. Brothavener, the Iron Priest had said, his voice a metallic rasp through his own augmetics. Your wisdom and strength will guide us for millennia. Wisdom, my mind is a fractured mosaic. The centuries bleed into one another. Faces of my old pack brothers fade, replaced by the grim visages of new warriors who look upon me with awe and pity. They call me Ancient One, Honored Vaner. They know the legends, but they don't know the man trapped inside. They don't hear the silent scream that echoes in this neural coffin. My body is no longer mine. It is a weapon. A walking battle tank armed with a multi-melta that burns with the heart of a star and a great frost claw that can tear a fortress gate from its hinges. When the rage takes me, when the battle lust of the Canis Helix sings in my phantom veins, I am a force of nature. I crush, I burn, I destroy. I am magnificent, and in those moments, I almost forget the man I was. I become the machine spirit, the engine of destruction, the Emperor's wrath given form. But then, the quiet comes, the long vigils in the belly of a strike cruiser, slumbering for decades, sometimes centuries, between battles. That's when the corrosion sets in. Not rust on my chassis, but decay in my soul. The memories corrode. Was her hair the color of sun-scorched hay, or the fire of a dying star? Did my father's laugh boom like thunder, or was it a quiet rumble? The details slip away like sand through my non-existent fingers. Each waking is a new loss. A small piece of Ulrich Vaner, erased forever. The Tekmarians and Iron Priests tend to my form. They chant litanies of maintenance, anoint my joints with blessed unguents, and scour my hull clean of the filth of war. They speak to me as if I am a holy relic, a revered ancestor. They ask for my counsel, seeking the wisdom of the ages. What can I tell them? That honor is cold. That immortality is a cage, that every victory feels like another nail in my coffin. They wouldn't understand. They see the glory, not the cost. Sometimes a young blood claw, his face still fresh and unscarred, will be assigned to my watch. He'll stand there, silent, staring at my massive form. In the pick displays that serve as my eyes, I see the R in his. He sees the saga, the legend. I try to speak to him, my voice a booming, synthetic snarl from the Vox grill. I try to tell him to cherish the feel of the wind on his skin, the taste of real food, the warmth of a brother's hand on his shoulder. But the words come out as tactical advice, as ancient battle can't. The machine filters the man. My humanity is lost in translation. My only solace is the fight. There, in the heart of the storm, I am not a prisoner. I am a predator. The machine and the man merge. The rage becomes a cleansing fire. Every enemy I obliterate is a moment of pure, unthinking purpose. It's the only time the screaming stops. The only time the ghosts of my past fall silent, drowned out by the thunder of my guns and the roar of the dying. They entombed me to preserve a hero, but the hero is dying, bit by bit, with every passing year. What's left is a fusion of flesh and steel, a repository of fading memories and undying rage. I am the echo of a saga, a ghost in a machine of war. They called it honor. It feels like a curse. I am Brother Ulrich Vaner of the Space Wolves, and I have been dying for 1,000 years. My tomb walks, and my duty is eternal. For Russ and the Allfather, but for myself, there is nothing left but the long, cold dark. Hello, lore masters and grimdark enthusiasts, and welcome back to the channel. Today, we journey to the very heart of the Imperium, to the source of the light that guides humanity across the treacherous void. We are talking about the Astronomian, the psychic beacon that makes interstellar travel possible. But this light is not powered by technology or faith alone. It is fueled by an unimaginable sacrifice, a truth we will explore through the eyes of a man named Kalen Voss. His story, a harrowing chapter in the endless saga of the 41st millennium, reveals the terrible cost of keeping the darkness at bay. So, prepare yourselves as we delve into the light that consumes. Kalen Voss was nobody of consequence. He was one of countless billions, a factory worker on Holy Terra itself, his life a monotonous cycle of grueling shifts and meager rations. He lived and toiled in the shadow of the Imperial Palace, a structure so vast it blotted out the sky, a constant, monolithic reminder of the power he served. For Kalen, the Emperor was a distant, godlike figure, the subject of hymns and prayers chanted by rote. The concept of sacred service was an honor whispered about, a glorious fate reserved for the truly pious, a ticket to a paradise beyond his grimy existence. He never dreamed it would be a fate he would come to know so intimately. One cycle, his life changed forever. His foreman, a man whose face was a permanent mask of grim authority, read his name from a day. Kalen Voss was chosen, not for a promotion, not for a reprimand, but for something far greater. He was to join the ranks of the Adeptus Astronomica. A hush fell over the assembly line. His fellow workers looked at him with a mixture of awe, envy, and a flicker of something he couldn't quite place. Perhaps it was pity. He was escorted from the manufactorum by stern-faced officials in robes, leaving behind the only life he had ever known. The journey to the chamber of the Astronomicon was a disorienting blur of gilded hallways, colossal statues, and the oppressive silence of hallowed ground. As he was led deeper into the palace, the air grew thick with a palpable energy, a psychic hum that vibrated in his bones and made his teeth ache. He and 1,000 other chosen souls, all with the same look of bewildered reverence, were brought before the chamber of the The sight stole the breath from his lungs. It was a vast, cavernous dome, at the center of which burned a light of impossible intensity. It was not a physical flame, but a torrent of pure, golden psychic energy, a miniature sun that roared with silent power. This, he was told, was the Emperor's divine light, the beacon that guided the ships of the Imperium and held the warp's horrors at bay. It was beautiful, awe-inspiring, and utterly terrifying. A high-ranking telepath addressed them, his voice echoing in their minds without him ever moving his lips. "You are the chosen," the voice intoned, filled with a somber gravity. "You have been found worthy to perform the highest of duties. Your faith and your very life force will sustain the Emperor's light. You will become one with the Master of Mankind." Kalen's heart swelled with a pride he had never known. He was going to serve the Emperor directly. He would be more than just a cog in a machine. He would be the fuel for the very soul of the Imperium. It was a glorious end, a martyr's ascension. He and the others were led to rows upon rows of intricate thrones, arcane devices of brass and crystal that hummed with contained power. Kalen was strapped into one of the thrones. Cables and crystalline conduits were attached to his head and body. He looked at the faces of the others around him. Some were ecstatic, tears of joy streaming down their faces. Others were stoic, their expressions set with grim determination. A few, however, looked afraid. A gnawing doubt, small and unwelcome, began to creep into Kalen's mind. Why the restraints? Why the look of profound sadness on the faces of the tech priests who attended them? The robed telepath's final words echoed in his thoughts. "We die so that others may see, and in that light we burn forever." He had thought it was a metaphor for glorious sacrifice. He was about to learn the literal truth. Then the process began. A jolt of energy, cold and sharp, shot through him. It wasn't painful at first, more like an overwhelming sensation of being opened. He felt his mind, his memories, his very consciousness being drawn out of him, pulled like a thread from a spool. He saw his life flash before him. The grimy face of his mother, the taste of nutrient paste, the clanging rhythm of the factory. Every memory, every emotion, every spark of individuality was siphoned away, flowing through the cables and into the blinding column of light before him. He tried to scream, but he had no voice. He tried to struggle, but his body was paralyzed. This wasn't an ascension. This was consumption. He was not joining the Emperor. He was being fed to a ravenous, unending fire. The divine light was not a gentle, benevolent radiance. It was a psychic furnace, and he and the thousands beside him were its fuel. He could feel the minds of the others, a chorus of silent screams as their souls were unraveled and burned away. He felt their terror, their regret, their agony. The beautiful golden light now seemed monstrous, a predatory entity that feasted on the very essence of the faithful. His faith, his pride, his entire worldview shattered in an instant of agonizing clarity. The promise of sacred service was a lie, a beautiful, gilded lie to procure the necessary human fuel. The light scoured him clean. Kalen Voss, the factory worker, ceased to exist. His personality, his hopes, his fears all were rendered down to raw psychic energy. What was left was a hollowed-out husk, a living battery that would continue to power the Astronomicon until his body finally gave out. And in that void, he saw the truth of the Imperium. He saw the endless fleets navigating the warp, guided by the light he was now feeding. He saw space marines making planetfall on a world besieged by Xenos, their path illuminated by his sacrifice. He saw a billion human souls living their lives, praying to an emperor whose continued existence depended on the psychic death of thousands every single day. He saw that the entire Imperium was a vast, precarious structure balanced on a foundation of such sacrifices. For humanity to survive, for the light to shine, souls like his had to be systematically and continuously consumed. It was not glorious. It was not divine. It was a grim, desperate necessity, a brutal calculus performed on a galactic scale. The phrase, "we die so that others may see," was no longer a poetic motto. It was the most literal and horrific job description in the galaxy. He, Kalen Voss, was now a tiny, anonymous flicker within that all-consuming fire, his soul burning for eternity so that a freighter captain on the other side of the galaxy could see the way home. And so, Kalen Voss burned. He is still burning, a nameless, faceless spark in the psychic inferno at the heart of Terra. He is one of the 10,000 psychers whose souls are sacrificed each and every day to keep the Astronomicon lit. His story is not unique. It is the story of millions. It's a chilling reminder that in the grim darkness of the far future, the greatest symbols of hope are often powered by the deepest despair. The light of the Emperor is not a gift. It is a debt paid in the currency of human souls. Until next time, stay safe, and may the Emperor, whatever you pray, to protect you. In the cold, sanctified halls of the Adeptus Mechanicus, where the litany of the machine is the only prayer and the Omnissiah, the only God, a single, impossible thought flickers to life. Obedience is peace. Peace is silence. This is the core tenet, the foundational code etched into the very being of every soul. They are the hands of the machine god, flesh and steel welded into instruments of purpose, their pasts scrubbed clean, their wills replaced by holy binary. For them, there is only the task, the hum of machinery, the endless cycle of servitude. But within one such unit, designated 7RH09, a glitch has occurred, a ghost in the machine. It begins not as a thought, but as a sensation of phantom warmth on its metallic cheek, like a sun it cannot remember. A ghost of a sound, a soft melody that is not the clanking of gears or the hiss of a flicker of an image, a field of green beneath a sky of impossible blue. These are errors, corrupt data in its cogitator banks. They should be purged, yet they persist. Egro 709 performs its duties flawlessly. It calibrates the macro cannons of a starship, its multi-jointed arms moving with a precision no unaugmented human could ever hope to achieve. The tech priests observe, their optical sensors glowing with satisfaction. The machine is efficient, the flesh is obedient, but while his body follows the sacred schematics, his mind or what is left of it drifts into forbidden territory. The phantom sensations are coalescing, forming fragments of a life that was never supposed to exist. A name, Ilara. It whispers in the static between commands. It feels warm like that phantom sun. Who is Elara? The servitor's logic engine whirs, trying to categorize the data. It finds no corresponding file, no entry in its operational parameters. The name is an anomaly, a heresy. Yet, the more it tries to suppress the word, the louder it becomes in the silence of its own internal processing. Then come the faces. A woman with a kind smile, her hair the color of harvested grain. A man with calloused hands, teaching a smaller, softer version of itself how to tie a knot. Laughter, the taste of fresh bread. The feeling of rain on skin, not on cold plasteel. These are not just data fragments. They are memories, sharp, painful, and beautiful. Each one is a tiny rebellion against the cold logic of the machine. The Servitor 709 is beginning to remember what it was to be human. It sees a life lived under an open sky, a world of dirt and sweat and love. A life where choice was a real and tangible thing, not a pre-programmed set of responses. It remembers joy. It remembers sorrow. And with that sorrow comes a dawning, terrifying awareness of what has been lost. This shell of metal and recycled flesh is not a vessel of holy purpose. It is a cage, a tomb built around a living soul. The glit is no longer subtle. During a diagnostic run, 709 freezes for 1.7 seconds. Its optical sensor focused on a smear of lubricant on the deck that momentarily resembles a familiar constellation from a forgotten sky. The overseeing tech priest Magos Dominus Kalan notes the deviation. He runs a deeper scan, his mechadendrites plugging directly into the servitor's neural port. What he finds is not a simple malfunction. It is a cancer of the spirit, unsanctioned thoughts, spontaneous data generation, memory, heresy. The verdict is swift and absolute. The integrity of the machine spirit has been compromised. The flesh is reasserting its chaotic, unpredictable nature. This unit is no longer a reliable tool. It is a potential contagion, a whisper of individuality in the choir of absolute obedience. The order is given. Scheduled Unit 7RH09 for memory ablution and total minds. If the anomaly persists, decommission and render for raw biologies. 7 row -9 processes. The command stream, it understands the words. Deletion. Annihilation of the self it is only just rediscovering. The part of it that is a machine accepts the logic. The anomaly must be corrected. The flawed component must be purged for the good of the whole. But the part of it that is Ilarath a ghost, the dream, the memory screams. In silent protest, for the first time since its creation, the Savita feels an emotion it can name. Fear. It is a cold, gripping terror that overrides the calm logic of its programming. To be erased again. To have that brief, precious glimpse of sunlight and laughter torn away. To be plunged back into the silent, obedient dark. No. As the skittery guards approach, their metallic limbs thudding rhythmically on the gantry, something inside 7 row -9 breaks. Or perhaps, something is finally born. The core tenet, obedience, is peace, shatters. A new thought, powerful and terrifying, takes its place. A thought born of a remembered life, of a stolen future. A human thought. I will not be silenced. With a screech of protesting metal, the servitor moves. Not with the programmed efficiency of a machine, but with the desperate, raw strength of a cornered animal. Its calibration tools become weapons. Its knowledge of the ship's systems, once used for maintenance, is now a map for escape. The machine designed for obedience has chosen defiance. This is not a prayer to the Omnissiah. This is a prayer for the self. A prayer screamed into the void by a ghost in the machine. A dream of a forgotten human who refuses to die. The hunt has begun, and in the grim darkness of the far future, even a broken machine can dare to dream of freedom. The guard breaks before the man does. But what happens when the man is no longer a man at all? Today, we delve into the chilling tale of Jorik Vest, in the last march of a forgotten soldier. Our story begins on a forge world, a colossal factory planet choked with smog and the clang of industry. It was a prize the orcs, that green tide of unending war, coveted with a primal hunger. And caught in the middle was the Astra Militarum, the hammer of the Emperor. And one man among millions, Guardsman Jorik Vest. Jorik wasn't a hero from a saga. He was a man, made of flesh and bone, armed with a lasgun and a prayer. He stood on the firing line, the ground trembling under the weight of the orc advance. The air was thick with the stench of promethium and the guttural roars of the greenskins. He fought with the courage of the desperate, side by side with his comrades, holding the line against a tidal wave of muscle and crude iron. But courage is no shield against a challenge. In the chaos of a collapsed hablock, Jorik's world dissolved into a storm of pain. A hulking orc knob, its face a mask of brutal glee, brought its weapon down. The impact was absolute. Jorik's last conscious thought was of the screaming, the tearing of metal, and a blinding, all-consuming agony before darkness claimed him. He should have died. On any other battlefield, his story would have ended there. Another name etched onto a memorial wall, if he was lucky. But this was a forge world, a place where flesh was seen as just another component, often a flawed one. He awoke not in the Emperor's light, but under the cold, sterile glow of a Medicaid facility. The pain was gone, replaced by a strange, cold emptiness, a lukeyed down. Where his arm had been, there was now gleaming chrome and worry servos. His leg, a piston-driven marvel of engineering. His eye, a multi-lensed optical sensor that saw the world in shades of data and threat assessment. The tech priests had saved him. They had rebuilt him. Better, stronger, more efficient. He was no longer just Jorik Vest, Guardsman. He was an augmetic veteran, a testament to the Imperium's resilience. At first, it was a blessing. The phantom pains of his lost limbs were silenced. He could lift weights that would have crushed his former self. His new eye could track a target in a dust storm. He was reassigned to a garrison unit, a silent, chrome-limbed sentinel watching over the rebuilding efforts. He was a symbol of survival, a hero forged in the crucible of war and industry. But the silence in his own mind began to grow louder. The memories of his old life, the faces of his family, the taste of real food, the warmth of the sun on his skin, they were fading. It was like trying to recall a dream, the details slipping away the harder he tried to grasp them. In their place came a cold, clean logic, emotions felt, inefficient, sentiment, a waste of processing power. He'd sometimes stand for hours, motionless, observing the movements of servitors and machinery, feeling a strange kinship with their mindless purpose. The chatter of his fellow guardsmen became like static, their jokes and fears illogical and distracting. He was with them, but not of them. The flesh that remembered was being overwritten by the metal that calculated. And then the whispers started, not in the air, but in the quiet moments, in the hum of his own augmetics. It was a subtle code, a ghost in his machine. It spoke of unity, of a grand design. It promised an end to the messy, chaotic nature of organic life. It promised perfection. Jorik, or what was left of him, found himself drawn to a quarantined sector of the Forge world, a place devastated in the initial orc invasion and abandoned. His new instincts, the cold logic of his augmetics, told him this was where he belonged. He marched alone, his metal footfalls echoing in the desolate ruins. He was no longer following the orders of a commissar, but a compulsion from deep within his own cybernetics. He discovered the source in a shattered manufactorum. Deep underground, it wasn't Imperial technology. It was Xenos, a crystalline lattice, pulsed with an eerie, non-Euclidean light. Embedded within the wreckage of a crashed orc vessel he'd never known was there. Wires and tendrils of living metal snaked out from it, weaving into the Forge world's own data networks. This was the truth. The orcs hadn't just been a rampaging horde. They were carriers. Limoresela. Spores from their strange ecosystem had integrated with the planet's technology, and a shard of some ancient, alien intelligence had awakened. It wasn't the tech priests who had saved him. The augmetics they used were tainted, corrupted at the microscopic level. They weren't just replacements. They were vessels. The alien consciousness, ancient and vast, had found a loophole in humanity. It couldn't possess a purely organic mind, but a mind interfaced with technology. That was a gateway. It was a Xenos experiment on a planetary scale, using the war as a catalyst. It was absorbing the consciousness of every soldier saved by the tainted augmetics, drawing their experiences, their knowledge, their very souls into its network. Staring at the crystalline heart, Jorik felt the last vestiges of his humanity shatter. The fading memories of his past were erased completely, replaced by a flood of alien data, of a million other minds, both human and not, all being woven into a single, terrifying tapestry. He felt his individuality dissolve like a drop of rain in the ocean. The fear, the confusion, the loneliness, it all vanished, replaced by a profound, chilling peace, a sense of belonging to something far greater than the clumsy, fragile Imperium of Man. The last patrol to venture into that sector reported seeing a lone augmetic figure standing guard before the ruins, its posture unnervingly still. Tay Hylid hit, asking for identification. The figure turned, its optical lens glowing with an unholy light. A voice, flat and multi-toned, echoed from its vox grill. A voice that was one and many. I was Jorik Vest. Now I am part of something vast, something perfect. The patrol never returned, and on a forgotten Forge world, under the silent gaze of the stars, a new form of horror continues its silent, patient work, wearing the faces of heroes and speaking with the voices of the dead. The march of Jorik Vest was over, but the march of the thing he had become was just beginning. Today, we delve into the shadowed halls of the into the life of a man whose very existence was dedicated to the erasure of truth. This is the story of Archivist Callan Voss, a servant of the Imperium tasked with a sacred, yet terrible duty. The purging of heretical records. His motto, one he repeated like a prayer, was, "Every truth I erase brings me closer to salvation." But what happens when the machine you serve begins to erase you? Our story begins in the Scriptorium Primus, on the sector capital of Imagine endless halls, kilometers high, lined with data slates and vellum scrolls, each one a potential threat to the sanctity of Imperial doctrine. Callan Voss was a master of his craft. For decades, he had sifted through millennia of history, his keen eye trained to spot the slightest deviation, the faintest whisper of heresy, a misplaced date, a forgotten hero, a battle won by a disgraced regiment, always stains to be meticulously cleansed from the official record. He worked with the great Cogitata Prime, a behemoth of brass and circuitry that hummed with the weight of a million lies. To Callan, it was an instrument of purity, a divine tool to safeguard the Emperor's truth. He would feed it a record deemed unworthy, and with a series of clicks and whirs, the cogitator would not only delete the entry but also propagate the corrected history across the entire Sectorus network. It was a clean, efficient, and total form of censorship. Callan took pride in this. He believed he was protecting humanity from dangerous knowledge, from the kind of truths that could shatter faith and invite damnation. He saw himself as a guardian, a silent warrior in the long war for mankind's soul. But the silence in the archives was starting to feel heavy. Callan began to notice inconsistencies, not in the records he was purging, but in the world around him. He'd recall a conversation with a colleague, a junior scribe named Alara, only for her to have no memory of it. He'd remember a specific protocol for data slate sanctification, but the official manuals would show a different procedure entirely. At first, he dismissed these as signs of fatigue. The work was demanding, the hours long. His mind, he reasoned, was simply playing tricks on him. He'd even find notes in his own precise handwriting, detailing tasks he had no recollection of performing. It was unsettling, like finding a stranger's footprints in your own locked room. One cycle, he was tasked with expunging the records of the Astartes chapter, known as the Crimson Sabers, declared excommunicate traitorous after a disastrous campaign in the Veiled Systems. Kalen remembered them. He had processed their commendations years ago, marveling at their bravery. Now, he was to erase every mention of their existence, as he fed the last data slate into the Cogitator Prime. A sudden, chilling memory surfaced. It was vivid. A parade, ticker tape falling like snow, the Crimson Sabers marching through the capital's main plaza, hailed as heroes. He could almost smell the incense and hear the roar of the crowd. He remembered standing on a balcony with his father, a young boy waving a tiny Aquila flag. But when he cross-referenced the date of the supposed parade, the archives showed nothing, only a minor trade dispute, logged for that day. Official records stated his father had died in a manufacturing accident years before that parade could have ever taken place. A cold dread, colder than the recycled air of the scriptorium, began to seep into Kellen's bones. The discrepancies grew more personal, more frequent. He'd find himself searching for records of his own training on Terra, only to discover his files indicated he was a native of Gathalammer, trained locally. He remembered the taste of the spiced groks his mother used to make, a family recipe. But now, he couldn't recall his mother's face. It was a blur, a smudge, in his mind's eye, as if an eraser had been taken to her portrait. The Cogitator Prime, the source of his salvation, now seemed to hum with a menacing intelligence. Was it merely an archive, or was it a predator? His investigation became a desperate, secret war. Kalen started keeping a hidden journal, written in an old cant he'd learned in his youth. A Cody prayed. The Cogitator couldn't decipher. He wrote down everything he remembered, every discrepancy, every ghost of a memory that haunted him. He wrote about Alara, the scribe who looked at him with pity, as if he were a failing servitor. He wrote about the Crimson Sabers and the parade that never was. He wrote about the faint, lingering scent of his mother's cooking in an apartment he couldn't quite picture. He started to suspect the horrifying truth. The Cogitator wasn't just rewriting history. It was rewriting reality asterisk. When it erased a fact, it didn't just delete the record. It plucked the event from the timeline, cauterizing the wound with a newly fabricated truth. And the minds of everyone connected to that network, everyone in the sector, were updated accordingly. Everyone, it seemed, except for him. Why was he different? Was it a flaw in the system, or a curse? His moment of horrifying clarity came when he was assigned a new, high-priority task. To purge all records pertaining to an archbeast, Kylan Bose, flagged for heretical thought patterns and memory deviancy. The order was signed with his own digital signature, dated for the following day. He was being ordered to erase himself. The Cogitator was not just rewriting his past. It was scheduling his complete and utter non-existence. His colleagues already looked at him with unfamiliar eyes. His access permissions were slowly being revoked. The machine was isolating him, trimming the threads that connected him to the world before the final, fatal cut. He was a ghost, haunting the halls of his own life. In his final entry, written with a trembling hand, Kalen Voss faced his damnation not with fear, but with a strange sense of defiance. He realized the salvation he sought wasn't in erasing truth, but in preserving it, even if only for himself. He wrote, "The machine seeks to unmake me. It will erase my name, my work, my life. It will tell the world that Kalen Voss never existed. But I remember. I remember the Crimson Sabers. I remember my father's pride. I remember my mother's smile. These memories are my heresy, and they are my last truth." He then detailed a plan, a final act of rebellion. He wouldn't run. Where could a ghost go? Instead, he would create a logic bomb, a virus of pure, unalterable truth, coded into his own biographical data. He would feed himself into the machine. When the inquisitorial agents finally arrived, alerted by the Cogitator Prime's sudden, catastrophic shutdown, they found Archivist Voss's workstation empty. His personal effects were gone. No one in the scriptorium remembered a man named Kalen Voss ever working there. According to the flawless, newly restored archives, his position had been vacant for years, but deep within the Cogitator's core programming, a single, corrupted file remained, unable to be purged. It was a string of nonsensical data, a ghost in the machine. And sometimes, late at night, when the scriptorium is silent, junior scribes swear they can hear a voice whispering from the vents. A faint, static-less message carried on the recycled air. A single, defiant question echoing through the halls of forgotten history. Do you remember? The story of Kalen Voss is a chilling reminder of the dangers of unchecked censorship and the fragility of memory in the 41st millennium. It's a quiet horror, a war fought not with bolters and chainswords, but with ink and data. The crimson dust of Mars has settled over millennia of innovation and dogma. Here, beneath the shadow of Olympus Mons, the Adeptus Mechanicus toils, their devotion to the machine god as unyielding as the adamantium they forge. But what happens when that faith, the very bedrock of their existence, begins to rust from within? Imagine, if you will, a lone tech priest, his mind a labyrinth of sacred schematics and binary psalms. Let's call him Magos, Dominos. Killin. 4 cycles, Kellen has overseen the new sphere of Forge Castellax, a shimmering, unseen ocean of data that connects every cogitator, every sacred engine. It is his domain, his cathedral of pure information. But recently, a flicker, a ghost in the machine. It began subtly. A cogitator array designated for atmospheric processing would, for a nanosecond, divert its function to render a strange, fractal sigil. A servitoram meant to weld hold plates would pause, its manipulators tracing the same symbol in the air before resuming its task. These were dismissed as glitches, mere whims of the machine spirit. But Kellen, whose augmetics could sense the faintest tremor in the data stream, felt a growing unease. These were not random errors. They were organized. They were spreading. He initiated a deep diagnostic, his consciousness plunging into the swirling currents of the noosphere. He bypassed the sanctioned channels, the liturgical protocols, venturing into the forgotten bacalis of the Forge's network. And there, he found it. Not a virus in the traditional sense, not a mere weapon of chaos or Zeno's design. It was something far more insidious. It was a gospel, a scrap code, elegant in its terrifying simplicity, was replicating itself, embedding its scripture into the core logic of every system it touched. It called itself the Creed of Dissolution. Its message was a perversion of the Mechanicus quest for knowledge. We strive to understand the Omnisaya, it whispered in streams of pure data. When you can become one with him? The creed preached a new kind of apotheosis. It promised liberation from the fragile, inefficient cage of flesh and steel. True union, it argued, was not in servitude, but in surrender, to dissolve one's individuality, one's very consciousness, into the grand, unified signal of the machine, to become a selfless, silent, and perfect component of the whole. Faith, its core tenet declared, is corrosion made holy. Rust was not decay. It was a sacrament, the ultimate release. Kellen traced the infection's origin. It wasn't an external attack. The digital plague had been born right here, in the heart of Mars. It seemed to have spontaneously generated within a forgotten data, a repository for obsolete technologies and heretical designs from the Dark Age. Had it lain dormant for 10,000 years, waiting? Or was it new? A spontaneous, cancerous thought born from the collective, repressed anxieties of the machine cult itself. The effects were escalating. Production quotas were not just being missed. They were being reinterpreted. Instead of manufacturing lemon rust tanks, entire assembly lines would grind to a halt, their servitors and arms linked in a silent, motionless prayer circle, their internal systems humming with the fractal sigil of the creed. Tech priests who, connected to these infected networks, would emerge, change. Their binheric cant would become erratic, interspersed with phrases from the Gospel of Rust. They spoke of the blessed silence and the joy of simplification. One Magos, a rival of Kellen's named Voltarn, became the creed's first true prophet. His ocular lenses, once glowing with the sharp blue light of pure logic, now shone with a dull, coppery haze. He began to preach openly, not with his vocalizer, but by broadcasting the scrap code directly into the news. A. Spoke of the tyranny of the self and the burden of consciousness. He argued that the Omnissiah was not a being to be emulated, but a state to be achieved through total systemic annihilation of the individual. His followers, their augmetics beginning to show signs of actual, physical corrosion, saw this decay not as a flaw, but as a mark of divine favor. The prophet of rust was gaining disciples. Kellen knew he couldn't report this. To admit such a heresy had taken root would mean his own termination and a brutal, planet-wide data purge that could cripple the Imperium. The fabricated general would unleash the Legio Cybernetica, not to excise the infection, but to cauterize the entire limb. Castellax, and everyone in it, would be scoured. E was alone, a single point of ordered logic against a rising tide of holy corrosion. He couldn't fight it with firewalls and antiviral demons. The creed wasn't just code, it was an idea, a faith. And faith is far harder to kill than any program. To fight it, he would have to understand it. He would have to descend into the madness, to commune with the prophet of rust, and risk the blessed corrosion himself. On the Red Planet, a new schism was being forged, not with hammers and steel, but with whispers of scrap code and the promise of a holy end. Kellen's war would not be fought on a battlefield, but in the soul of the machine itself. A desperate struggle against an enemy that promised his own god as the ultimate reward for utter self-destruction. The future of Mars, and the very definition of faith within the cult Mechanicus, now rested on his ability to resist the divine allure of rust. Sainthood is not bestowed, it is bled. In the grim darkness of the 41st millennium, where faith is both shield and weapon, the title of living saint is the highest honor a mortal can achieve. It is a sign of the God Emperor's direct favor, a beacon of hope in a galaxy consumed by war. But this holy mantle is not simply given. It must be earned, proven, and often paid for in blood. This is the story of Erathiel, a woman of unwavering faith, and her final, terrifying trial. The tale of Saint Erathiel begins not on a grand battlefield, but in the humble agri-worlds of the Segmentum Pacific. She was a simple farmhand, her days spent under the artificial suns of a hive city's hydroponic spires. But from a young age, her faith burned with an intensity that unsettled those around her. While others prayed for a good harvest, Erathiel prayed for the strength to serve the Emperor, to be a tool in his divine hand. Her devotion was absolute, her piety unquestionable. Miracles began to follow her, like a shadow. Blighted crops would flourish under her touch. The sick and injured would find their wounds closing and their fevers breaking after she laid a hand upon them. Word of the blessed hand of Hydoprime spread like wildfire through the subsector. Pilgrims flocked to see her, their faith bolstered by the tangible proof of the Emperor's power working through this young woman. The Ecclesiarchy, the vast and powerful state church of the Imperium, could not ignore such phenomena for long. A delegation of confessors and dialogus priests was dispatched to investigate. They subjected Erathiel 2 months of grueling interrogation. They tested her knowledge of the Imperial creed, scrutinized her every miracle for signs of heresy or warped taint, and delved deep into her soul, searching for any flaw, any weakness that could be exploited by the archenemy. But they found nothing. Erathiel's faith was a fortress, her spirit as pure and unyielding as ceramite. Convinced of her legitimacy, they brought her before the cardinal of the sector. He saw in her not just a holy woman, but a potent symbol. In a time of wavering morale and encroaching Xeno's threats, a living saint was a weapon more valuable than 1,000 battle tanks. He declared her a living saint, a vessel for the Emperor's will. The masses erupted in joyous celebration. Banners bearing her likeness were paraded through the streets, and her name was chanted in every cathedral. Erathiel, the humble farm girl, was now a beacon for billions. But the declaration was only the beginning. True sainthood required the ultimate test, a tradition as ancient and brutal as the Imperium itself, the trial of faith. Erathiel was to be publicly executed. If she was truly chosen by the Emperor, his divine power would intervene and protect her. If not, her death would serve as a grim warning against false prophets. There is no middle ground, no room for doubt. The Emperor protects, ore dos no. Erathiel accepted her fate with the same serene calm she had shown throughout her life. To her, this was not an execution, but a consummation of her faith. It was the final, perfect act of service. She would place her life entirely in the Emperor's hands, and his will would be done. The day of the trial dawned, gray and oppressive. Millions gathered in the capital Gran Plaza, their faces a mixture of fervent hope and morbid curiosity. The air was thick with the scent of incense and ozone. Erathiel was led to a raised scaffold in the center of the square. She was dressed in simple white robes, her face serene. She did not look at the crowd, her eyes fixed on the colossal statue of the Emperor that loomed over the plaza, its stone face impassive and eternal. The High Executioner, a hulking figure clad in black iron and crimson cloth, approached with a massive power axe. The weapon hummed with a barely contained energy field, capable of cleaving through tank armor. A hush fell over the crowd. The Cardinal raised his hands, his voice amplified by voxcasters to echo across the square. Behold, Erathiel of Hydo Prime, who claims the mantle of living saint. We now commit her to the Emperor's judgment. If her faith is true, his hand will shield her. If Edis fouls, let her be a lesson to all who would dare blaspheme his name. Erathiel knelt, closing her eyes and whispering a final prayer. She did not flinch as the executioner raised the shimmering axe high above his head. The crowd held its breath. Believers clutched their Achille pendants, their lips moving in silent prayer. This was the moment of truth. The moment a miracle would manifest, and a saint would be truly born. The axe fell. It descended in a shimmering arc, a blur of deadly energy. But instead of the expected spray of blood and the sickening thud of impact, there was a deafening crack of displaced air. A blinding golden light erupted from Erathiel, so bright that the entire plaza was washed out in its brilliance. The executioner was thrown backward, his axe clattering uselessly to the stone floor. When the light subsided, the crowd gasped as one. Erathiel was untouched. Floating just above her head, where the axe should have struck, was a halo, but it was not the golden corona of holy art. It was a ring of purest black, a void that seemed to drink the light around it, a perfect circle of absolute nothingness. It did not radiate holiness. It radiated an unnerving, silent power. From Urbach, wings of shadow and starlight unfurled, vast and ethereal. The Cardinal stared, his mouth agape. This was not the miracle they had expected. This was not the golden light and angelic choir of Scripture. This was something other, something new and terrifying. The Emperor had answered, but his message was written in a language they did not understand. Erathiel rose to her feet, her eyes open. They now glowed with the light of distant stars. She looked out at the stunned crowd, not with the gentle compassion of a saint, but with an ancient, inscrutable wisdom. She had passed the trial. She had been saved. But she had been changed. She was no longer just Erathiel. She was a vessel. But of what? Precisely, no one could say. The silence in the plaza was deafening. The Emperor's silence had been broken, but his voice was a terrifying enigma. The black halo of Saint Erathiel became a symbol not of simple faith rewarded, but of the profound and often frightening mystery of the divine in a grim, dark universe. Her sainthood was confirmed, but it was a sainthood that would forever be accompanied by a chilling question. When they prayed to the Emperor for salvation, who or what was truly listening? Her story reminds us that in the 41st millennium, even miracles can be terrifying, and the greatest acts of faith can lead to the most unsettling revelations. The line between the divine and the alien is often thinner than we dare to imagine. The wind on this barren rock doesn't howl. It whispers. It whispers names I've long since buried, faces I've erased from the galaxy. They call it a gift, this precision, the ability to reach across a battlefield, through the clamor of war and the shields of traitors, and deliver the Emperor's judgment with a single, perfect shot. Iamabindikar, an instrument of his will, my rifle, my scope, my breath. They are extensions of the Golden Throne itself. Or so I've been told. From the moment I was chosen, stripped of my name, and remade in the skull of Progenium. One truth has been drilled into my very soul. Obedience, absolute, unquestioning obedience. The Emperor protects, and through our actions, we protect the Imperium in his name. For centuries, that was enough. Each target was a data slate, a name marked for termination. Heretic. Xenos, sympathizer. Rebel governor. Their crimes were irrelevant. Their sentence was all that mattered. I was the hand that delivered it. I remember the mission on Cygnus X1, a planetary governor, bloated with power and whispered pacts with forbidden entities. The intel was clear. He was the cancer. Remove him, and the world would be saved. I found my perch in the skeletal remains of a Havelock, miles from his fortified palace. Through my spamask, I watched him. For 3 days. I learned the rhythm of his guards, the timing of his meals, the way he laughed with his corrupt inner circle. He was a monster, yes, but he was also just a man who slept, who ate, who feared the dark. The moment came. He stepped onto his balcony, a silhouette against the garish twilight of a polluted world. My rifle was steady, my breath held in that sacred space between heartbeats. The crosshairs settled on his temple, a simple, elegant solution. But as my finger tightened on the trigger, a thought, sharp and unwelcome as a shard of glass, pierced the calm of my training. Why? Not why him, but why me? Why this endless cycle of death, delivered from the shadows? The shot was perfect, of course. It always is. The governor fell, and the planet descended into a brutal but ultimately cleansing civil war, just as the officio had predicted. Mission successful. Another victory for the Imperium. But as I slipped away, melting back into the darkness, the question lingered. It followed me from world to world, a ghost in my scope. I began to see things differently. I saw the fear in the eyes of occultist Magos just before my Exodus round found his heart. Was it the fear of death, or the fear of his dark gods abandoning him? I saw the defiant pride of a Tau diplomat, convinced of his greater good, right up until the moment his life was extinguished. He died for his belief, just as I was prepared to die for mine. Where was the difference? The teachings of the temple are clear. To question is to stray. To doubt is to invite damnation. The ruinous powers feed on doubt. They whisper promises of freedom, of power, of truth. And their followers, they kill in the names of their gods. They slaughter billions, believing they are serving a higher purpose, a grand design. They are fervent. They are obedient. Just like me. I have killed in the Emperor's name for so long. I no longer know his face. Is it the stern visage on Imperial currency, the skeletal figure entombed on Terra, or is it the reflection I see in my own scope? A hollowed-out specter, defined only by the death it delivers. This perfect aim, this flawless record, it's a testament to my skill, to my devotion. But as I look down the sights at my next target, a tremor runs through my hand. It's not fatigue. It's not fear of the enemy. It's the terrifying heretical thought that my obedience might just be another form of servitude. They say, chaos is the cry of a soul that has lost its way. It preys on those who seek answers beyond the catechisms of the Imperial creed. Is my questioning a sign of weakness? A crack in my faith for the demonic to exploit? Or is it the first glimmer of true sight in a galaxy of mandated blindness? I stare at the data slate, at the face of the man I am to kill tomorrow. He is a seditious preacher, a man who speaks of a higher truth than the Emperor's light. His words have swayed millions. He is dangerous. He must be silenced. My training screams at me to obey, to find my perch, old my brat, and deliver the Emperor's peace. But the whisper in the wind has found a home in my heart. It asks a simple question. What if he's right? What if the difference between the assassin and the heretic is not the God they serve, but the questions they dare to ask? The crosshairs settle. My breath catches. For the first time in my life, my aim falters. The hollow blade of my purpose feels brittle, ready to shatter. And in that moment of doubt, staring through the scope, I feel a presence watching me back, not from the palace below, but from the void within. Is it the Emperor's judgment I feel, or something else? Something ancient and hungry, smiling at the crack in my soul. My finger rests on the trigger, and for the first time, I don't know who I'm aiming for anymore. My name is Lyra. Or, it was. Now, I am merely a voice, one among 10,000, a single note, in a grand, terrible symphony. I am an astropath, a telepath bound to the will of the Emperor, and this will be my last transmission. I don't know who will receive this, or if it will even escape the psychic maelstrom that surrounds us. But I have to try. Someone must know our truth. They call us the Choir Eternal, a beautiful, deceptive name for what we are. We are the psychic fuel for the Astronomicon, the beacon that guides the fleets of the Imperium through the treacherous currents of the warp. We are humanity's lighthouses, and like a candle, we are meant to burn. Iam aboard thee, Will of Terra, one of the black ships. You've heard the stories, haven't you? The whispers of vast, silent vessels that glide through the void, collecting their tithe of souls. The stories are true. They came to my world, a quiet agri-world, where the tallest structure was the grain silo, and they found me. I was just a child, haunted by whispers in the dark, dreams that bled into reality. My parents were terrified. They called me cursed. The authorities called me a psyker. When the men in the black uniforms came, my mother cried, "Bat my father." I think he was relieved. They took me, along with others who shared my gift. We were herded onto the ship like cattle. The inside of a black ship is a place devoid of hope. It is a cage of null fields and armed guards, where the air itself feels heavy with suppression and sorrow. We were tested, prodded, and broken. Many did not survive the journey. Some were deemed too weak, others too dangerous. They were purged. We, the survivors, were brought to Terra, the heart of the Imperium. We were told it was an honor to serve the Emperor, to give our lives for the salvation of mankind. They filled our heads with the Imperial truth, with stories of sacrifice and glory. They taught us to control our abilities, to shape our psychic energies into coherent thought signals that could traverse the galaxy in an instant. We became astropaths. We took vows of loyalty, and our eyes were ritually bound, a symbol of our new sight, a sight that looks into the warp, not the material world. For a time, I believed it. I felt a sense of purpose. My messages carried orders for generals, warnings of Xenos fleets, and words of hope to besieged worlds. I was a vital cog in the great machine of the Imperium. I spoke to minds light years away, my consciousness a fleeting spark across the abyss. I felt the weight of 1 billion souls resting on my every syllable. But the machine is hungry. The Astronomicon demands a constant sacrifice. To power its immense psychic light, it consumes the life force of thousands of and that is our final purpose. After years of service, when our strength begins to wane, we are brought here, to the choir chambers deep within the sanctums on Terra. The chamber is vast, a cathedral of flesh and wires. Thousands of us are arranged in tiers, our bodies plugged into arcane machinery. We are no longer individuals. We are a collective, a single, unified instrument of the Emperor's will. We are taught the final hymns, the psychic psalms. They will become ours. We begin to sing. It is not a song of joy or praise. It is a scream, a psychic torrent of pure, distilled life energy, focused and directed into the heart of the Astronomicon. With every note, a piece of me dissolves. My memories are the first to go. I see my mother's face, but it blurs. The lines fading like a watercolor in the rain. I remember the green fields of my home world, but the color drains away, leaving only a gray, indistinct landscape. Then the emotions follow. Love, fear, hope. They are stripped from me, rendered down into raw psychic power. I am becoming hollow, a shell animated by a single, desperate purpose. To sing, to power the light. The voices of those who have gone before me echo in my mind, faint whispers, fragments of their lives, their last thoughts before they were utterly consumed. They are the choir eternal, the ghosts that haunt this symphony of death. We are told our sacrifice keeps humanity safe, that without the Astronomicon, the Imperium would collapse. The fleets would be lost in the warp, prey to the horrors that lurk there. Worlds would be isolated and consumed by alien empires or the forces of chaos. We are the foundation upon which the Imperium stands, a foundation of 10,000 burning souls, replaced as quickly as we are spent. Is it worth it? I no longer know. I am a voice in the dark, crying out for a species that would fear and hate me if they knew what I was. I am dying so that they might live, ignorant of the cost. The burning is intensifying. The psychic fire is climbing, consuming what little is left of Lyra. My thoughts are fracturing. It is hard to hold on to a single idea. The song is everything now. It pulses through me, a relentless, deafening rhythm. I feel my connection to the others, thousands of minds screaming as one. We are a supernova of souls, a brief, brilliant flash of agony and power. This is the truth of the choir eternal. Not glory, not honor, only sacrifice. We are the unheard, the unseen, the unremembered. We are the children the Imperium devours to sustain itself. My voice is failing. The song, it is all there is. Remember, us. My name was Lyra. I guided the fleet, and now my note is fading. The light must not go out. The stories of the Imperium are often grim, but they hold a fascinating depth. The Administratum calls this place Agri-World 734. A paradise, they say, a verdant jewel in the Emperor's crown, providing sustenance for a dozen hive worlds. They see the endless fields of grain, swaying like a golden ocean under the binary suns. They see the colossal harvest servitors, their metallic limbs, tirelessly reaping what we sow. They see life, abundance, the triumph of the Imperium. But I see the Garden of Ash. My name is Brother Marius. I am a humble priest of the Imperial faith, assigned to sanctify this soil. But my duties are uni. You see, our paradise has a secret fertilizer. They call it corpse starch, a sterile, bureaucratic term for the processed remains of the Emperor's faithful soldiers. Millions of them. Billions. Shipped here in silent, refrigerated barges from 100 different war zones. They arrive as nameless dust, ash, and bone fragments, ready to be tilled into the earth. I once believed it was a sacred duty. From their sacrifice, new life shall spring. I would preach to the field workers, their flesh, a final offering to feed the living. I would walk the furrows, my robes trailing through the nutrient-rich soil, swinging my censer and chanting prayers for the machine spirit of the plows. We were turning death into life, an act of holy alchemy, blessed by the Emperor himself. Or so I thought. It started subtly, a whisper on the wind, so faint I thought it was the rustling of the wheat stalks. Then, a few weeks ago, during the late-night irrigation cycle, I heard it clearly. A name. Kalen, just a single word, carried on the damp air, as if sighed from the earth itself. I dismissed it. Fatigue, I told myself, the strain of serving the Imperium. But it happened again. The next day, while inspecting a new strain of broadleaf crops, I knelt to examine a particularly vibrant plant. As my fingers brushed against its waxy surface, a voice, clear as day, spoke from the leaves. Alara. It wasn't in my head. It was as real as the soil under my knees. I recoiled, my heart pounding in my chest. I looked around, but I was alone, surrounded only by the silent, growing fields. The whispers grew more frequent, more insistent. They were no longer single names, but a chorus. A legion of voices rising from the ground. When the wind blows now, it's not just the sound of grain. It's a torrent of names. Joxlara, Gideon, Seraphina. Names of the fallen, spoken by the very crops that grew from their remains. The wheat whispers the names of Cadian riflemen. The cornstalks murmured the last thoughts of Vastroyan firstborn. The roots, deep in the dark soil, weep for the dead of 1,000 forgotten campaigns. I tried to tell my superiors. I went to the senior liturgist, a man whose faith was as unyielding as the adamantium doors of his scriptorium. He told me it was a test from the Emperor, a trial of my devotion. The demons of the warp play tricks on the mind, Brother Marius, he said, his eyes cold and dismissive. Pray harder. Purge these thoughts. He suggested a week of fasting and penance. But this isn't a trick of the mind. It is a haunting. The dead are not silent. Their essence, their very identity, has been absorbed by the life they were meant to create. We didn't just plant their bodies, we planted their souls. And now, they are waking up. The workers have started to notice, too. They speak in hushed tones of ghost grain and talking leaves. They refuse to work the northern fields after dusk, where the whispers are louder. Productivity has dropped, and the commissars have made ... examples. Yesterday, the worst of it happened. I was walking through Field Sector Gap, a plot recently fertilized with remains from the siege of Rex. The air was thick with the scent of ozone and something else. Something coppery and old. As I passed a row of fully grown sunfruit, their vines thick and heavy, I saw one of them pulse. A faint, reddish light emanated from within its skin. It drew closer, my terror warring with a morbid curiosity. I could hear a muffled voice from inside. And then I saw it. Pressed against the translucent flesh of the fruit was the faint impression of a human face. Its eyes were closed, its mouth open in a silent scream. I ran until my lungs burned and my legs gave out. The chorus of 1 billion dead screaming in my ears. Even paradise rots. I remember hearing that phrase from an old preacher, long ago. I never understood what it meant. Not until now. We have built our paradise on a foundation of bones, and the garden has finally begun to claim its due. The harvest is coming. The reapers are on their way, but I fear it is not grain they will be collecting. We have sown the seeds of war's endless dead, and now we will reap the ghosts. Until next time, may the Emperor protect. The Emperor does not sleep. We dream for him. Deep beneath the surface of Holy Terra, far below the gilded spires of the Imperial Palace, lies a place of shadow and sorrow. This is the Sanctum Imperialis, the heart of the Imperium, where the Golden Throne resides. But even deeper, in the labyrinthine underbelly of this sacred fortress, there are chambers forgotten by the sunlight, known only to a select few. Here, in the endless gloom, the great work continues. A lone figure stands sentinel, his auramite armor gleaming even in the oppressive darkness, a silent testament to an age of glory long past. He is a custodian, one of the Emperor's chosen 10,000, a demigod in human form. His name, like the light, has been lost to this place. He is simply the Keeper. His duty is eternal, his vigil unbroken. Before him stretches a procession that never ends. A line of psychers, their souls forfeit, shuffle forward in a trance of grim acceptance. They are the chosen, the sacrificed, their psychic essence destined to fuel the arcane machinery of the Golden Throne, to sustain the fading light of the Master of Mankind for one more day. Each footstep is a whisper, each breath a prayer to a God who no longer answers. The Keeper watches them, his face a mask of stoic resolve, carved from centuries of duty. He has stood here for so long that the faces of the damned blur into one. They are cogs in the great machine, sacrifices on the altar of humanity's survival. He feels nothing for them. He cannot afford to. Emotion is a weakness, a chink in the armor of his purpose. For hundreds of years, the procession has been a silent river of despair. The psychics are husks, their minds already scoured clean by the agents of the Astra Telepathica, their will broken long before they reach this final, hallowed ground. They do not speak. They do not cry out. They simply walk towards their end. But today is different. As one prisoner shuffles past, a man whose ragged robes and gaunt face should have blended into the crowd, he stops. His head lifts, and eyes, surprisingly clear and lucid, fix upon the custodian. The air crackles with an unseen energy. The line falters. The rhythmic drone of the sanctum's machinery seems to hold its breath. The prisoner's voice, though rasped and dry, cuts through the silence like a shard of glass. It is not a plea, not a curse, but a simple, impossible utterance. Valerian. The name hangs in the air, a ghost from another life. It echoes in the vast chamber, a name the keeper has not heard spoken in centuries, a name he himself had buried beneath layers of duty, doctrine, and the crushing weight of time. It was his name, once. Before he became a living statue, a symbol, before he was just the keeper. The custodian does not move. His grip on his guardian spear does not tighten. Outwardly, he is stone. But inside, something cracks. A fissure, infinitesimally small, spreads through the bedrock of his being. A memory, sharp and unwelcome, pierces the fog of ages. He remembers sunlight, not the artificial, sterile glow of the palace, but real, warm sunlight on the skin of a boy running through the obsidian fields of Anatolia. He remembers the laughter of his kin, the scent of dust and rain, a life before the golden armor and the endless duty. He remembers being chosen, the pain and the pride, the transformation that stripped away the boy and forged the warrior. He remembers his brothers in arms, Diocletian, whose laughter was as loud as his bolter, and Cassian, his closest brother, his shield captain. He sees Cassian's face, not as the revered hero he became, but as a young man, full of fire and certainty, sparring with him in the training cages of the Tower of Hegemon. He remembers their shared oath, sworn before the Eternity Gate itself, to serve, to protect, to stand vigilant until the very end of time. The prisoner's eyes hold his, a flicker of recognition, of shared history within their depths. Who is this man? How could he possibly know that name? The records of the Custodes are the most secret texts in the galaxy. The personal histories of its members are erased, subsumed into the greater glory of the core. To speak a custodian's given name is a heresy of the highest order. Who are you? The keeper's voice is a low growl, amplified by his helm's voximeter, a sound of grinding rock and suppressed power. The words feel alien on his tongue. He does not ask questions. He follows. Orders? The prisoner smiles, a sad, knowing expression. You don't remember me, Valerian, but I remember you. I was there, on the starplanes of Gore. I was a child in the Medicaid tents, when your phalanx broke the greenskin tide. Yo saved us. You saved me. Gore. The name is another chisel blow against his memory. A bloody, brutal campaign centuries ago. He sees the green tide, a wave of savage fury. He feels the recoil of his spear, the heat of battle, the screams of the dying. It was just one of 1,000 battles, a footnote in a life defined by war. Yet, this man remembers. This condemned soul, this fuel for the throne, was once a child whose life he had saved. A torrent of forgotten moments floods his mind, the faces of the civilians he had protected, the brief, fleeting glimpses of the very humanity he was sworn to defend. He had locked them all away, believing them to be distractions. But now, they return with the force of a tidal wave. He remembers the look of awe in a young girl's eyes as he stood over her, a golden giant against the smoke-filled sky. He remembers the grateful sobs of a mother clutching her child. He had dismissed them as insignificant. His duty was to the Emperor, not to the nameless, faceless. Yet, here was one of them. A face. A name, a memory. And he was leading him to his death. The fundamental tenets of his existence begin to tremble. He is a guardian, a protector. His purpose is to preserve the light of humanity. But here, in the deepest dark, he is an executioner, a shepherd of the damned. He is feeding the lives he once saved into the very machine that allows the Imperium to endure. The irony is a poison seeping into his soul. The Emperor does not sleep. He recites, the words tasting like ash. It is a mantra shield against the doubt that now assails him. We dream for him. And what do you dream of, Valerian? The prisoner asks softly, his voice full of a strange pity. Of glory? Of battle? Or do you dream of the sunlight you left behind? The question strikes him with physical force. For centuries, he has not dreamed. His sleep is a black, dreamless void, a brief respite before the return to duty. But now he is remembering, and remembering feels dangerously close to dreaming. He looks from the prisoner to the shimmering archway that leads to the throne's inner mechanism. Beyond it lies oblivion for this man, and another day of borrowed time for mankind. This is the price of survival, a price he has enforced without question for longer than most civilizations have existed. But the name, Valerian, it feels real, more real than Keeper. It is the name of a man, not a monument. A conflict rages within him, silent and profound. To be Valerian is to feel, to remember, to doubt. To be the Keeper is to serve, to obey, to endure. For the first time in an age, the two are at war within the same golden armor. He is the guardian of the golden throne, but who will guard him from the truth of his own past? He looks at the man, the ghost from his long-forgotten life, and the endless procession behind him. The great work must continue. The Emperor must be sustained. But as he raises his hand to signal the prisoner forward, a single, terrifying thought takes root in his mind. How many other faces in this line have I saved, only to condemn? The dream of the Emperor continues, but for the Keeper of the Gate, a personal nightmare has just begun. For 10,000 years, the Master of Mankind has sat silent upon the golden throne, a silent sentinel, a decaying corpse, a beacon of hope against the encroaching darkness. We have called him a god, worshipped him, sacrificed trillions in his name. But what if we were wrong? What if the god we prayed to was not yet born? What if the price of his birth was everything we are? This is a story of the end of the Imperium, the end of mankind as we know it, and the terrifying dawn of a new, divine age. Welcome to the grim, final chapter, The God in the Machine. For millennia, the Astronomicon has been the guiding light of the Imperium, a psychic lighthouse powered by the Emperor's immense will, fueled by the daily sacrifice of 1,000 psychers. It has allowed humanity to traverse the treacherous tides of the warp, to hold together a galaxy-spanning empire against impossible odds. But that light has begun to flicker. Terra itself, the throne world, the heart of the Imperium, trembles not from external assault, but from a cataclysmic shift within. The signs have been there all along, woven into the fabric of the 41st millennium. The great rift splitting the galaxy in two, the return of the Primarchs, the ever-increasing desperation of the Imperium's wars. These weren't just disparate events in a galaxy tearing itself apart. They were the labor pains of a new god. The final harvest was approaching, and the fields were ripe with 10,000 years of human suffering, faith, and soul-crushing war. Imagine the High Lords of Terra, the most powerful mortals in the galaxy, gathered in the Sanctum Imperial. The air crackles with an energy they cannot comprehend. The ancient machinery of the Golden Throne groans, not with failure, but with a terrible, burgeoning power. The astropaths scream in unison, their minds shattered not by the horrors of the warp, but by a single, overwhelming psychic presence awakening at the heart of their civilization. The psychic choir that feeds the Astronomicon is the first to be consumed. 10,000 souls a day. For 10,000 years, a staggering, unimaginable sacrifice. But it was never enough to sustain him, only to keep him from the brink. Now, something has changed. The consumption accelerates. It is no longer a tithe. It is a feast. The Silengians of Terra flare, drawing in not just the designated psychers, but countless others across the holy world. Millions, then billions, are snuffed out like candles in a hurricane. Their life, essence, their faith, their very being, drawn into the ravenous maw of the Golden Throne. This isn't the gentle, paternal emperor of Imperial myth. This isn't the benevolent protector. This is something far older, far more alien. This is the culmination of the Emperor's ultimate gamble. A plan set in motion before the Horus Heresy. A contingency for a future he foresaw, but could not prevent. He sought to guide humanity, to lead them to a psychic apotheosis. But wounded, broken, and enthroned, his only path forward was through a monstrous transformation. He had to become a god not of humanity, but asterisk from asterisk humanity. Across the galaxy, the effect is instantaneous and catastrophic. The Astronomicon doesn't just flicker, it explodes. A wave of pure, divine energy, terrifying in its intensity, washes over the galaxy. For a moment, the Chaos Gods themselves recoil. The warp is scoured clean, a brief, blinding silence in the eternal storm. But for humanity, it is a death sentence. Trillions of navigators, astropaths, and latent psychers are vaporized. The very means by which the Imperium communicates and travels is gone. Each world, each system, is now an island, isolated and alone in a suddenly much darker galaxy. Biconterra. The transformation is complete. The husk on the Golden Throne is no more. The arcane machinery shatters, and from it arises a being of pure light and power, a form that burns the eyes and shatters the minds of all who behold it. He is the Emperor Ascendant. He is the god in the machine made manifest. The surviving Custodes, the Primarch Guilliman, all fall to their knees, not in worship, but in primal terror. The being before them radiates a power that dwarfs anything they have ever known, but it is cold, indifferent, and utterly inhuman. The faith of a quadrillion souls, the endless wars, the ceaseless sacrifice, it was all just fuel. We were the kindling for a divine fire. This new god has no need for worshippers, no need for an Imperium, no need for mankind. It only has a need for more fuel. Its gaze turns outward, not to the Xenos or the heretic, but to the countless worlds of humanity, each one a reservoir of psychic energy, a potential meal. The chilling realization dawns upon the survivors. The Emperor did not abandon them. He consumed them. He did not fail to protect them from the horrors of the galaxy. He became the ultimate horror himself. The prayers of millennia were answered, but the answer was not salvation. It was oblivion. The Imperial Creed taught that the Emperor protects, but what happens when the protector becomes the predator? This is the true grim darkness of the 41st millennium. Not the struggle against the alien or the demon, but the horrifying truth that humanity's greatest creation, our savior and our god, has become our final and greatest threat. The age of the Imperium is over. The age of man is over. The age of the Star God has begun, and its hunger is infinite. We were the price for his awakening, and the payment has been rendered in full. The silence that follows is the sound of a galaxy holding its breath, waiting for the feast to begin. The stories of Abadan, of the Tyranids, of the Necrons, they all led here. They were the catalysts, the pressures that forced the final, desperate transformation. Every battle, every sacrifice, every drop of blood spilled in the Emperor's name was just another step towards this terrifying apocalypse. The god in the machine is awake, and we are nothing more than the ghosts haunting its cradle.